unemployed sister with 9 children demanded I spend over $2,000 on luxury Christmas gifts. So I gave her 9 boxes filled with trash and a prison sentence. Now, while she sits in a jail cell, I am left raising her traumatized kids while my own mother screams that I am a heartless monster who destroyed our family. But you have to understand why I did it. I discovered that for years, my sister was not just entitled, she was selling every winter coat and toy I sent on the black market to fund a secret, crippling gambling addiction. She let her children freeze and starve in a broken home just so she could play online poker. I snapped. I drove through a blizzard to expose her dark secret in front of everyone, handing her the evidence of her crimes instead of the iPads she demanded. The look on her face when the police arrived haunts my nightmares. I thought I was saving those innocent children, but now they look at me with terror in their eyes. The guilt is tearing me apart. I have lost my entire family to save these kids, and I feel completely alone. Please, I need to know the truth. Did I do the right thing, or was I just as cruel as she was? My name is Riley Vance. I am 30 years old, and I am a senior marketing director for one of the largest firms in Chicago. I live in a 3-bedroom penthouse on the Gold Coast, the kind of place with floor-to-ceiling windows that offer a panoramic view of Lake Michigan, currently churning under a slate-gray November sky. To the outside world, I am the definition of the American dream. I made it out of the trailer park. I clawed my way through student loans, and I built a fortress of solitude made of steel, glass, and 7-figure bank accounts. But as I stood there that Tuesday evening, swirling a glass of Pinot Noir that cost more than my mother's monthly grocery budget, I felt that familiar, suffocating weight pressing down on my chest. It is a specific kind of heaviness that only people who have escaped poverty but left their family behind can truly understand. It is the weight of survivor's guilt. The apartment was silent. It was a pristine, curated silence. The air conditioning hummed a low, expensive note. My reflection in the glass showed a woman in a silk blouse, hair pulled back in a severe, professional bun. I looked composed. I looked untouchable, but my reflection lied inside. I was bracing for impact. It was mid-November, which meant the annual assault was about to begin. In my family, we do not have holiday traditions. We have transaction periods. I turned away from the window and walked to my kitchen island. The marble was cold under my fingertips. My phone sat there, face up, vibrating softly against the stone. One notification, one email. The sender identification read, Sarah Vance, my older sister. I stared at the screen for a long time, my heart rate picking up a rhythm that had nothing to do with affection and everything to do with anxiety. Sarah is 38 years old. She has never held a job for longer than 3 months. She has a husband, Dave, whose primary contribution to society seems to be converting oxygen into carbon dioxide and cheap beer into domestic arguments. And together, they have 9 children. Yes, 9. A chaotic, sprawling brood ranging from toddlers to teenagers, living in the rusting shell of a house back in Ohio that I have paid to repair 3 times in the last 5 years. I took a sip of wine, bracing myself, and swiped the screen to open the email. The subject line was written in all capital letters, Christmas for the Angels. The body of the email started with the usual saccharine preamble. Sarah always began her requests with excessive flattery, a tactic she had perfected over decades of manipulation. Hey, little sister, the email began. Hope the big city life is treating you well. We miss you so much down here. Mom was just saying yesterday how proud she is of her rich girl. The kids ask about Auntie Riley every single day. Little Timmy even drew you a picture, but I forgot to attach it. Anyway, I know you are super busy making millions, but I wanted to reach out early about Christmas. Things have been so tough for Dave and me this year. The economy is brutal for regular folks like us. You know, not everyone gets those big bonuses. I paused, feeling the familiar prickle of irritation. The subtle jab at my success was a classic Sarah move. She framed my hard work as luck and her chronic irresponsibility as victimhood. I continued reading, "Since you are the cool aunt and the only one of us who really made it, I figured you would want to do something special for the kids this year. They have had such a hard year. Riley, you have no idea. I do not want them to be disappointed again. So, instead of you guessing what to buy, I had them make a wish list. This way, you know your money is going to exactly what they need." Below that paragraph was a list. It was not a list of toys. It was not a list of winter coats or boots. It was a link-embedded manifest of high-end consumer electronics that would make a technology reviewer blush. I scrolled down, my eyes widening with disbelief. Number 1, Leo, age 14, PlayStation 5 Pro console plus 2 extra controllers and the latest Call of Duty game. Number 2, Bella, age 12, iPad Pro, 12-inch model, with the Apple Pencil. Number 3, Jacob, age 10, Nintendo Switch OLED model. Number 4, Sophie, age 9, MacBook Air. I stopped scrolling. I actually laughed out loud, a harsh, dry sound that echoed in the empty apartment. A MacBook Air for a 9-year-old? I was 30 before I bought my first brand new laptop. I forced myself to read the rest. It was a relentless parade of excess. Noise-canceling headphones, smartwatches, designer sneakers. At the bottom of the email, Sarah had helpfully done the math for me. The total came to $2,150, excluding shipping and tax. And then, the closer, I included the direct links to make it easy for you. Just ship them to the house address. Please order by Friday so they get here in time. Do not let the angels down. Riley, you know how sensitive they are. Love you. Sister. I set the phone down on the counter, face down, as if the device itself were radioactive. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from a cocktail of rage and exhaustion. For years, I had been the enabler. I knew the term well. My therapist and I had spent countless hours dissecting the dynamic. When our father died, I promised him I would look out for the family. I took that promise and turned it into a prison sentence. Every time Sarah cried poverty, I opened my wallet. When the furnace broke, I paid. When Dave got a driving under the influence charge and needed a lawyer, I paid. When the kids needed school supplies, I sent crates of backpacks and notebooks. But this was different. This felt predatory. I picked up the phone again and looked at the list. There was something off about it. It was too specific, too curated. Sarah had never cared about technology before. Last time I visited, the kids were running around barefoot in the snow while Sarah sat on the porch smoking cigarettes, complaining about how the government checks were not enough. Now, suddenly, her children required enterprise-level computing power. I walked over to the window again, looking down at the stream of headlights moving along Lakeshore Drive. The city below was full of people hustling, working, grinding to survive. and 300 miles away. My sister was sitting on a couch that I probably paid for, demanding a $2,000 tribute as if it were her birthright. A memory surfaced. Last Christmas, I had sent a box of high-quality winter jackets and boots for all the kids. I spent hours picking out the right sizes. 2 weeks later, when I FaceTimed them on Christmas morning, none of the kids were wearing the jackets. Sarah had said they were saving them for special occasions. I never saw those jackets again. When I asked about them in February, Sarah claimed they had been lost at school or left at a friend's house. All 9 of them lost. The doubt that had been festering in the back of my mind for years began to harden into something solid. I looked at the email again. Number 4, Sophie, age 9, MacBook Air. Sophie could barely read. I remembered talking to her on the phone a few months ago. The poor girl was struggling with basic literacy because Sarah refused to help her with homework, claiming the teachers were responsible for that. Why would a child who struggles to read need a $1,000 laptop? I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I was not just being asked for money. I was being played. The Riley of 5 years ago would have sighed, clicked the links, and put it on a credit card just to avoid the drama. The Riley of 5 years ago thought money could buy peace, but the Riley standing in this penthouse tonight was tired. I was tired of the emotional blackmail. I was tired of being the villain in their narrative every time I hesitated, and the hero only for the 30 seconds it took for the transaction to clear. I took another sip of wine, draining the glass. The rich, dark liquid tasted bitter on my tongue. I was not going to click those links. Not this time. But I knew Sarah. If I said no, she would not just accept it. She would scream. She would cry. She would weaponize our mother. She would turn the entire extended family against me. Let them come, I thought, a cold resolve settling in my stomach. However, before I started a war, I needed to be sure. I needed to understand why my sister, a woman who claimed she could not afford heating oil, was suddenly desperate for $2,000 worth of resellable electronics. Wait, resellable. The word flashed in my mind like a neon sign. I unlocked my phone and opened a new browser tab. I did not reply to the email. Not yet. Instead, I typed in the name of the gaming platform I had purchased for my nephew Leo the year before. I had set up the account for him remotely so he could play as soon as he opened the box. I still had the login credentials saved in my password manager. If Leo was such a gamer that he needed a PlayStation 5 Pro, surely he had been logging hours on the PlayStation 4 I sent last year. I hit enter. The page loaded. My eyes scanned the user profile. Last online, 350 days ago. The controller had been activated on Christmas Day. And then, silence. Nearly a year of silence. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. Leo had not played it. He had not even touched it since the day it arrived. So where was it? The seeds of deception had been planted a long time ago. I realized I had just been too busy playing the role of the benevolent, a successful aunt, to notice they were growing into a forest of lies. I closed the browser. I looked at Sarah's email one last time. Do not let the angels down. She had written, I will not. I whispered to the empty room. My voice sounded foreign, sharp, and dangerous. But I am done saving you. Sarah, I stared at the phone for what felt like an hour. Though the digital clock on the microwave told me only 5 minutes had passed. The screen was dark now, reflecting the recessed lighting of my kitchen ceiling. I knew I had to make the call. Sending an email back would be cowardly. and sending a text message would only give Sarah more ammunition to screenshot and share with her circle of sympathy-addicted friends. This needed to be a voice-to-voice conversation. I needed to hear the tone of her voice when the word no finally hit her ears. My finger hovered over her contact name. A picture of us from 10 years ago popped up. We were smiling in the photo, arms around each other at a 4th of July barbecue. We looked like sisters then. Now, looking at that image felt like looking at strangers. I pressed the call button and brought the phone to my ear. The line rang. Once, twice. She picked up on the third ring. Riley. Her voice was high-pitched, breathless, and drenched in a sugary warmth that set my teeth on edge. I knew you would call tonight, I told Dave. I said, Riley never forgets us. Did you get the list? The kids are literally jumping up and down right now, asking if Auntie Riley got the email. The lie was so casual, so practiced. It was 11 o'clock at night in Ohio on a Tuesday. If her children were jumping up and down right now, it was not because of Christmas anticipation, but because there was no one enforcing a bedtime. Hi, Sarah, I said. My voice came out lower than I intended, steady and cool. It was my boardroom voice, the one I used when firing a vendor who had failed to deliver. Yes, I got the email. That is actually why I am calling. Oh, good. Sarah rushed on, not letting me finish. Listen, I know the PlayStation is hard to find, but I put a link to a reseller. It is a little more expensive, but Leo really has his heart set on it, and make sure the MacBook is the silver one. Sophie hates the gold color. I closed my eyes and pinched the bridge of my nose. The entitlement was a physical force, pushing against me through the receiver. Sarah, stop, I said. I did not raise my voice, but I put enough edge in it to cut through her rambling. I am not buying the things on that list. Silence. It was a heavy, thick silence that stretched across 3 states. I could hear the background noise of her house for the first time. The hum of a television blaring a cartoon. The sound of a dog barking in the distance. And the clatter of dishes. Excuse me? Sarah said. The sugar was gone. Her voice had dropped an octave. Flat and dangerous. What did you just say? I took a breath, gripping the marble counter for support. I said, I am not buying $2,000 worth of electronics. Sarah, it is too much. These kids are too young for this kind of hardware. And frankly, I do not think it is appropriate. I waited for the explosion, but she surprised me. She went quiet again. Calculating. Appropriate? She repeated, testing the word like it was a piece of rotten fruit. You do not think it is appropriate? Since when are you the expert on raising children? Riley, I seem to recall you chose a career over a family. You have empty bedrooms. I have 9 mouths to feed. I ignored the jab. I had heard it 1,000 times before. I want to send them something. I continued, trying to keep the conversation on track. I am willing to send a $200 gift card for groceries or clothes, or I can buy them all new winter coats again. I know it gets cold in that house. I can send warm bedding, things they actually need. $200? Sarah scoffed. A harsh, barking laugh followed. $200 for 9 kids? That is $20 a kid. Riley, what are they supposed to get with that? A pair of socks? You make that much in an hour. Probably in a minute. It is a gift. Sarah, I said, my patience beginning to fray. It is not a salary. It is not child support. It is a gift. And last year, I sent expensive gifts that disappeared into thin air. Leo never even turned on his console. There was a pause, a beat of hesitation on her end. I had caught her off guard. He plays it all the time. She lied quickly, too quickly. I checked the logs. Sarah, I cut in. The account has been inactive for 11 months. Where is it? I could hear her breathing change. It became jagged, angry. She did not answer the question. Instead, she went on the offensive. This was her signature move. When cornered, attack. You are unbelievable, she hissed. You sit there in your $1 million apartment, drinking your expensive wine, judging me. You have no idea what it is like to struggle. You have no idea what it is like to have children crying because they are the only ones at school without cool things. You promised Dad. Do you remember that? You stood by his hospital bed and you promised him you would take care of us. The mention of our father hit me like a physical blow. It was her trump card. She played it every time the money tap threatened to run dry. I promised to make sure you did not starve. Sarah, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I did not promise to fund a luxury lifestyle I do not even have myself. A 9-year-old does not need a MacBook. That is final. Suddenly, a male voice roared in the background on her end. It was Dave. He sounded slurred, heavy with alcohol. Is that the bitch sister? Give me the phone. I heard a scuffle, the sound of the phone fumbling against fabric. Dave. Stop it. Sarah yelled away from the receiver, but she did not sound scared. She sounded like she was performing. Then her voice came back to me, clearer now, but filled with venom. You are a selfish, cold-hearted snob. Riley, you always have been. Mom was right about you. You think your money makes you better than us, but you are just a lonely, sad woman with nothing but a bank account to keep you warm at night. I felt a tear prick the corner of my eye, not from sadness, but from pure, unadulterated frustration. If you do not want the gift card, I said, my voice turning into ice, then you get nothing. Fine. Sarah screamed, keep your dirty money. We do not need your charity. I will figure it out myself, like I always do. I will sell my wedding ring if I have to. I will not let my kids suffer just because their aunt is a miser. She did not wait for me to respond. The line went dead with a violent click. I stood there in the silence of my kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The adrenaline was coursing through my veins, making my hands shake uncontrollably. I lowered the phone and placed it face down on the counter. I had done it. I had finally said no. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt liberated. That is what all the self-help books say about setting boundaries. They tell you that boundaries bring peace, but I did not feel peace. I felt a deep, gnawing pit opening up in my stomach. The silence in the penthouse suddenly felt less like solitude and more like isolation. Sarah's words echoed in my mind. I will sell my wedding ring. It was a lie. Of course. Sarah had pawned her real wedding ring 5 years ago and replaced it with a cubic zirconia replica she bought at a mall kiosk. I knew this because I was the one who paid the pawn ticket the first time, before she lost it again. But the threat lingered. It was not about the ring. It was about the narrative. Sarah was already spinning the story in her head. She was the martyr. I was the monster. I walked over to the wine fridge and pulled out another bottle, ignoring the fact that it was a Tuesday and I had a board meeting at 8 in the morning. I poured a glass, my hand still trembling. Something about the call bothered me. Beyond the insults, beyond the guilt trip, it was the desperation. Sarah had always been greedy. Yes, She had always felt entitled to my success, but tonight, she sounded frantic. When I mentioned the gift card, she did not just get mad, she panicked. $200? That is $20 a kid. She had done the math instantly. She was not looking for gifts. She was looking for a sum. She needed a specific amount of value. $2,000 worth of merchandise. I took a long drink of wine. The liquid did little to settle my nerves. Outside my window, the wind howled off the lake, rattling the heavy glass pane. It was a sound I usually loved, a reminder of the barrier between me and the elements. But tonight, it sounded like a warning. I looked at my phone again. No new messages. That was the first crack in the dam. Sarah never just hung up and walked away. She always sent a follow-up text, a guilt trip meme, a picture of a crying child, something to twist the knife. But there was nothing, just silence, and that silence terrified me more than the screaming. It meant she was planning something. It meant she had moved past negotiation and into warfare. I unlocked my phone and opened the family group chat, a chat I had muted 3 years ago. It was dormant, but then I saw the typing indicator bubbling at the bottom of the screen. Not from Sarah, from my mother. I stared at the 3 little dots, bouncing up and down, waiting for the verdict. The message popped up. Riley, how could you? Sarah just called me in tears. She said you laughed at her. I did not reply. I turned the phone off completely. I walked to the bedroom, the plush carpet swallowing my footsteps. I felt like a soldier who had just fired the first shot in a battle I did not understand. I thought I was fighting over Christmas presents. I thought I was fighting against entitlement. I had no idea that I was about to uncover a rot so deep it would threaten to pull the entire family tree down on top of us. I woke up to the sound of a jackhammer pounding against my skull. It took me a few seconds to realize the noise was not coming from inside my head, but from my phone on the nightstand. It was buzzing incessantly, vibrating against the mahogany wood like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. I rolled over, squinting against the harsh morning light filtering through the blinds. My head throbbed from the wine I had consumed the night before. The digital clock read 7 in the morning. Far too early for anyone to be calling me. Unless the office was on fire. I reached for the phone, my hand fumbling blindly until I grasped the cold metal. I brought it to my face and blinked my eyes into focus. 74 notifications. My stomach dropped. I sat up, pulling the duvet tight around my chest, suddenly feeling very cold. These were not work emails. These were Facebook notifications, Instagram tags, direct messages from people I had not spoken to since high school. I opened the Facebook application, my thumb hovering over the red bubble that signaled disaster. At the top of my feed, shared by 12 people, including my Aunt Linda and 3 of my cousins, was a post from Sarah. She had posted it in a group called Moms Support Moms, a massive community with over 50,000 members, but she had made the post public, ensuring that the entire world could see her performance. The headline she had written was designed to draw blood. When family chooses money over love, a Christmas heartbreak. I forced myself to read it. I do not usually do this. Sarah wrote, I try to be strong for my babies, but tonight I am broken. I reached out to my sister, my own flesh and blood, asking for help with Christmas. My husband and I have hit a rough patch, and we just wanted to put a few smiles on our 9 children's faces. My sister is a wealthy executive in Chicago. She lives in a penthouse. She wears designer clothes. I asked her for a few educational tools for the kids, tablets for school, a laptop for my daughter who wants to be a writer. And you know what she said? She laughed. She literally laughed at me. She offered me a $200 gift card for 9 children. That is barely enough for a Happy Meal each. Then she told me my kids were not worth the investment. I am sitting here crying, looking at my sleeping angels, wondering how someone can have so much money but such a poor heart. Please pray for us. We might have to cancel Christmas this year. Below the text was a photo. It was a picture of her youngest, Timmy, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, wrapped in a thin blanket. It was a staged masterpiece of poverty porn. I knew for a fact that Timmy had a bed frame. I bought it for him 2 years ago. Sarah had clearly dragged the mattress onto the floor for the photo opportunity. I scrolled down to the comments. It was a bloodbath. What a monster. One stranger wrote, "If that was my sister, I would cut her off forever. Rich people are sickening." Another commented, "She probably spends more on her shoes than she would on her nephews." Drop her name? Someone else demanded. Let us see if her company likes employing child haters. My breath hitched in my throat. This was not just a family spat anymore. This was a targeted assassination of my character. Sarah had not tagged me directly in the post, but in the comments, she had accidentally let slip my first name and the city I lived in. It would not take long for the internet mob to find me. My phone rang again in my hand, making me jump. It was my mother, Judy. I stared at the screen. I wanted to throw the phone across the room and bury my head under the pillows. I wanted to go back to being the anonymous, successful woman in the high-rise. But I knew ignoring Judy would only make it worse. I swiped the green button. "Hello, Mom," I said. My voice was raspy, weak. "Riley Vance." My mother snapped. There was no greeting, no question about my well-being, just the sharp, disappointed tone she had perfected when I was 6 years old. "Have you seen what is happening? Have you seen what you have done to your sister?" "What I have done?" I repeated, disbelief washing over me. "Mom, she is lying. She sent me a list of demands for $2,000 worth of electronics. She wanted a MacBook for Sophie. Sophie is 9. I do not care about the list." Judy yelled. "I care about the fact that my phone has been ringing off the hook since 5 this morning. Aunt Linda says you are heartless. Your cousin Mike is posting nasty things about you. You are embarrassing this family. Riley, you are embarrassing me." I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the room spin slightly. She is publicly shaming me. "Mom," I whispered, "she is lying to thousands of strangers to get money. Why are you not yelling at her?" "Because she is a mother in crisis," Judy screamed back. "She is desperate." "Riley, desperate people do desperate things. You have so much. You have everything. Would it have killed you to just buy the damn toys? What is $2,000 to you? A handbag? A dinner? It is the principle." "Mom," I said, but the fight was draining out of me. The gaslighting was so effective, so total, that for a second, I wondered if I was the villain. Maybe I was being stingy. Maybe I was detached from reality. "Fix this," Judy commanded. Her voice dropped to a low, menacing hiss. "I do not care how you do it. Send her the money, buy the gifts, apologize. Just get her to take that post down before it ruins your reputation. If you lose your job over this, do not come crying to me." The line clicked dead. I sat there in the silence, the echo of my mother's voice bouncing off the walls. My chest felt tight, constricted. I felt small. I felt like the little girl who was always told she was too loud, too ambitious, too much. while Sarah was the fragile flower that needed protecting. I opened my banking application. My thumb hovered over the transfer button. I could send Sarah $3,000 right now. I could label it for the kids. I could text her and beg for forgiveness. She would take the post down. She would post an update saying, "My sister came through. Miracles happen." The mob would disperse. My mother would calm down. Peace would be restored. It was the path of least resistance. It was the path I had walked for a decade. I typed in the amount, $3,000. My finger hovered over the confirm button, but then a memory flashed in my mind. The specific detail from the night before, the PlayStation. Leo really has his heart set on it. Sarah had said, "He plays it all the time." I froze. Why did she lie about that? If she was just a desperate mother wanting gifts for her kids, why lie about the old gifts? Why not say, "The old one broke," or "He wants an upgrade"? Why insist he was playing a console that my data showed had been inactive for nearly a year? I closed the banking application. I opened the browser on my phone again. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to be sure before I surrendered. I logged into the PlayStation Network parental control portal. I had set it up under my email address because Sarah claimed she was bad with technology and asked me to handle the updates. I navigated to the user profile for Leo the Lion 2010. Status: offline. Last online: 350 days ago. Trophies: 0. Playtime: 0 minutes. He had never played a single game. Not one. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Okay, maybe they never connected it to the internet. Maybe they just played offline discs. That was possible, right? I needed more proof. I switched back to Facebook. I went to Sarah's profile. I scrolled back through her timeline, ignoring the fresh hate comments on her recent post. I went back to last Christmas, December 25th. There were dozens of photos. Sarah loved documenting her life to prove she was a supermom. "Merry Christmas from the Vance Chaos." The caption read. I zoomed in on the photos. The living room was a mess of wrapping paper. The kids were holding up cheap plastic toys, dolls from the dollar store, generic action figures. I scanned the background. I was looking for the sleek black box of the PlayStation 4 Pro I had sent. I was looking for the bright red parka I sent for Bella. I was looking for the expensive leather boots I sent for Dave. They were not there. In one photo, Leo was sitting on the couch, looking sullen, holding a pair of socks. In the corner of the frame, behind a pile of trash bags, I saw something. It was a cardboard box, a brown shipping box with my handwriting on the label. It was taped shut. I scrolled to the next day. December 26th. Sarah had posted a status update. So thankful for the blessings, but bills are piling up. Does anyone know where I can sell some old stuff we do not need? My heart hammered against my ribs. I went to the comments of that old post. A woman named Becky had asked, "What are you selling?" "Ton?" Sarah had replied. "Just some electronics, unwanted gifts, brand new." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. She did not just sell them used. She sold them new. She sold them immediately. My mind raced back to every Christmas, every birthday for the last 5 years. The iPad for Bella's 10th birthday? Gone. The Nintendo Switch for Jacob? Gone. The designer clothes? Gone. I had spent tens of thousands of dollars over the years. I thought I was funding their childhoods. I thought I was giving them the joy their parents could not afford, but none of it had ever reached their hands. I had been sending boxes of cash disguised as gifts. and Sarah had been liquidating them before the wrapping paper was even torn. A wave of nausea hit me. It was not just about the money. It was about the cruelty. I looked at the photo of Leo again. He looked so sad. He was 14 years old. He probably knew his aunt sent him a game console. He probably watched the box arrive. And he probably watched his mother sell it to a stranger while telling him he did not deserve it. Or worse, maybe she told him I never sent anything at all. Suddenly, the hate comments on the recent post took on a new, twisted meaning. Sarah was not just lying to the internet. She was gaslighting her own children. She was painting me as the villain to them, so they would not ask why Aunt Riley's gifts never appeared. The wealthy aunt is so rich, but regrets buying her nephew an iPad? The voice in my head changed. It was no longer the voice of a victim. It was the voice of a prosecutor building a case. I stood up from the bed. The dizziness was gone. The hangover was forgotten, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity that made my vision razor-focused. I walked into my walk-in closet and pulled out a suitcase. I did not pack suits. I packed jeans, a thick wool sweater, boots that could handle mud and snow. I grabbed my laptop. I grabbed a separate hard drive where I kept all my financial records. I dialed my assistant's number. It was 7:30 now. "Riley?" she answered, sounding surprised. "Everything okay? Clear my schedule for the rest of the week," I said. My voice was steady, deadly calm. "But you have the strategy meeting with the board on Thursday." She stammered. "Cancel it." I said, "Tell them I have a family emergency. Tell them, Saoyuting Haling, 2 hashes greater than, tell them I have to go save some angels." I hung up. I was not going to send the money. I was not going to apologize. I was going to Ohio, and I was going to burn Sarah's house of lies to the ground. Even if I had to stand in the ashes with her. The drive from Chicago to the crumbling outskirts of Cleveland took 5 hours, but it felt like I was traveling back in time. I left the city in a blur of gray steel and wet pavement, the skyline disappearing in the rearview mirror like a fading memory of civilization. As I merged onto the interstate, the scenery flattened out into the desolate, winter-brown fields of Indiana and Ohio. The sky was a low, oppressive ceiling of clouds, threatening snow that refused to fall, hanging there like a held breath. I did not listen to music. The silence in the car was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic thumping of the tires against the asphalt and the hum of the heater. My mind was a chaotic storm of strategy and regret. Before leaving, I had made a call to an old contact of mine, a forensic accountant named Marcus, who owed me a favor from a corporate merger 3 years ago. I asked him to look into Sarah and Dave's public records, not just the credit scores, but the deep stuff, court filings, liens, judgments. I needed ammunition. Marcus had promised to email me a dossier by the evening. Until then, I was flying blind, guided only by the burning knot of suspicion in my stomach. As I crossed the state line into Ohio, the landscape shifted. The prosperous suburbs gave way to rusted industrial skeletons. Factories that had closed 20 years ago stood like tombstones along the highway. This was the Rust Belt reality that Sarah used as her shield. She weaponized this decay. She wore her zip code like a badge of honor, proof that she was a survivor while I was a traitor who fled for the ivory tower. I exited the highway and navigated the winding, potholed roads toward Oak Haven. It was a town that had seen better days in the 1970s and had been slowly dying ever since. Main Street was a row of boarded-up storefronts interrupted only by a liquor store, a payday loan center, and a dollar store. I turned onto Sycamore Street. The name was idyllic. The reality was anything but. I slowed my car. A sleek black sedan that looked alien in this neighborhood of rusted pickup trucks and sagging porches. I parked 2 blocks away from Sarah's house, tucked behind a large, overgrown hedge that bordered a vacant lot. I killed the engine. The silence rushed back in, colder this time. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My leather gloves creaked with the tension. I was not just a sister visiting for the holidays anymore. I was a spy in enemy territory. From my vantage point, I had a clear view of number 412. The house was a 2-story Victorian that might have been beautiful once, 50 years ago. Now, it looked like a rotting tooth. The white siding was gray with grime and mildew. Several shingles were missing from the roof, creating dark gaps like missing scales on a reptile. But it was the details that made my stomach turn. A sheet of thick, translucent plastic was duct-taped over the large bay window in the living room. Sarah had told me last month that the glass had cracked during a storm and she could not afford to fix it. I had sent her $500 for the repair immediately. Looking at the plastic now, fluttering weakly in the wind, the tape peeling at the corners, I realized that the glass had likely been broken for months. Or perhaps it was never broken, and the money had simply vanished. The front yard was a graveyard of discarded objects. A rusted bicycle frame without wheels lay on its side in the dead grass. A plastic swimming pool, cracked and filled with black sludge and wet leaves, sat near the porch. Trash bags were piled up against the side of the garage, ripped open by raccoons or stray cats, spilling refuse onto the driveway. This was not poverty. This was neglect. I watched, my breath fogging up the car window. I wiped it away with my sleeve, desperate not to miss a second. The front door opened. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sarah stepped out onto the porch. She was holding a cigarette in one hand and a smartphone in the other. She was typing furiously, likely responding to the comments on her viral post, feeding the fire she had started. I squinted, focusing on her appearance. She was not wearing the ragged, stained sweatshirt she usually wore during our FaceTime calls. She was wearing a coat, a long, camel hair trench coat with a distinct tortoiseshell button detail and a belted waist. I gasped, the sound sharp and involuntary in the quiet car. I knew that coat. I had bought that coat for our mother, Judy, 2 winters ago. It was a designer piece, Italian wool, costing nearly $1,200. Mom had loved it. She had cried when she opened the box. Why was Sarah wearing it? Had Mom given it to her? Or had Sarah guilt-tripped Mom into handing it over, claiming she had nothing warm to wear? Sarah took a long drag from her cigarette, blowing the smoke out into the frigid air. She wrapped the coat tighter around herself, looking warm, looking comfortable. She looked like the queen of her own landfill. Then, the door opened again. 3 of the children tumbled out. It was the middle 3, Jacob, Sophie, and little Liam. My anger, which had been a hot flame, suddenly turned into a block of ice. It was 30 degrees outside. The wind was biting. Jacob was wearing a thin hoodie with no zipper. Sophie was in a t-shirt and pajama bottoms that were too short for her ankles. Liam, who was only 5, was wearing sneakers with no socks. I could see his bare ankles turning pink in the cold. They were not playing. They were shivering. Get back inside, Sarah barked at them, not looking up from her phone. I am working. The kids did not move immediately. They hovered on the porch, looking at their mother. Sophie reached out, and tugged on the edge of the expensive camel coat. "Mommy, I am hungry." I could hear her faint voice carry across the distance. "Go ask your father," Sarah snapped, shaking the girl's hand off the expensive wool. "And do not touch me with those dirty hands." Sophie recoiled as if she had been slapped. She shrank back, wrapping her thin arms around her chest. I watched, paralyzed by a mixture of fury and heartbreak. In her Facebook post, Sarah had called them her angels. She had claimed she would do anything for them. She had begged the world for money to buy them joy. But here, in the gray reality of Tuesday afternoon, she was prioritizing a Facebook argument over her freezing, hungry daughter. She was wrapped in $1,200 of Italian wool while her children stood in the cold. I looked at the trash bags again. I looked at the plastic on the window. For years, I had told myself that sending money was the right thing to do. I told myself that even if Sarah was irresponsible, at least the money would trickle down to the kids. At least they would have heat. At least they would have food. I was wrong. The money never trickled down. It stopped with Sarah. It stopped with Dave. I had been pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom, and the hole was their greed. The children went back inside, defeated. Sarah stayed on the porch for another minute, finishing her cigarette. She flicked the butt into the dead grass of the yard, adding one more piece of trash to the collection. Then she turned and went inside, slamming the door shut. I sat alone in my car. I felt sick, physically sick. The image of Sophie shivering in that thin t-shirt burned into my retinas, and the image of Sarah, warm and arrogant in my mother's coat, overlaid it like a double exposure of cruelty. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was the email from Marcus. The subject line read, "Vance Family Financials. You are not going to like this." I picked up the phone. My hand was steady now. The trembling was gone. I had come here looking for the truth about a PlayStation. But as I stared at the rotting house, I realized the PlayStation was just the tip of the iceberg. I was not just dealing with a scam. I was dealing with a crime scene. I unlocked the phone and opened the attachment. The first page was a summary of debts. Credit cards, maxed out, mortgage, 6 months behind. Utilities, final notice. But it was the second page that made my blood run cold. It was a list of income sources. There were no wages. Sarah and Dave had not reported W-2 income in 4 years. Instead, there were deposits, frequent, irregular cash deposits into a joint account at a local credit union, and then a recurring outgoing payment every week, sometimes twice a week, hundreds of dollars. The recipient was listed as Lucky 777 Offshore Holdings. I knew that name. It was a shell company used by dozens of illegal online casinos and sports betting sites. I looked back at the house. They were not poor because of the economy. They were not poor because of bad luck. They were poor because they were gambling away every cent that came into their hands. My money, my mother's money, the government's money, and now they wanted $2,000 more. Not for iPads, not for laptops. They needed to cover a loss. They were in the hole, and they were using their children as bait to get me to bail them out. I put the phone down. A dark, cold resolve settled over me. It was a feeling I had never experienced before. It was the absence of empathy. For 30 years, I had been the sister, the fixer, the safety net. Today, I resigned from that position. I started the car engine. I was not going to knock on the door. Not yet. I was not going to give Sarah the satisfaction of a screaming match on her front porch. That would be too easy. That would allow her to play the victim again. I needed to be smarter, I needed to be ruthless. I put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb, driving slowly past the house one last time. "Enjoy the coat, Sarah," I whispered to the rearview mirror, "because it is the last warm thing you are ever going to get from me." I drove to the only decent hotel in Oak Haven, a generic chain establishment near the highway exit that smelled faintly of chlorine and stale coffee. I set up a command center in room 314. My laptop was open on the desk, surrounded by notes scribbled on hotel stationery. Outside the window, the snow had finally started to fall, dusting the grim town in a deceptive layer of white purity. I spent the next 48 hours living a double life. To my family, I was silent. I ignored the texts from my mother, demanding updates. I ignored the passive-aggressive Facebook tags from cousins I had not seen in a decade. I let them believe I was cowering in my Chicago penthouse, shamed into submission. In reality, I was hunting. I had the financial records from Marcus, confirming the gambling addiction. But I needed more. I needed the smoking gun that tied the gifts directly to the cash. I needed to prove intent. It was late on a Wednesday night when I found it. I was trawling through local online marketplaces, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, OfferUp, searching for any trace of the specific items I had sent over the years. I had tried searching for PlayStation and iPad with no luck. The listings were too generic, too numerous. Then, I remembered something, a small detail. 2 years ago, for Bella's 10th birthday, I had sent her a high-end designer backpack. It was a limited edition, with a very specific floral pattern. But before I shipped it, I had taken it to a leather worker in Chicago and had her initials, B.V., embossed on the inner tag in gold foil. It was a subtle, personal touch that I thought would make her feel special. I typed "floral backpack limited edition" into the search bar of a popular resale application. I set the location filter to within 50 miles of Oak Haven. 3 results popped up. 2 were generic knockoffs. But the third one, Saoyi Jinghao Ling R. Jinghao Dayu. My breath caught in my throat. The photos were high quality, clearly taken with a good phone. The backpack looked pristine. The description read, "Brand new with tags. Never used. Unwanted gift. Retails for $300. Selling for $150. I clicked through the photos. Front, back, side. And then, the seller had included a picture of the inside label to prove authenticity. There, shining in gold foil against the dark leather, B. And I felt a surge of triumph mixed with nausea. I looked at the seller's profile. The username was Supermom Deals. I clicked on Items for Sale. The page loaded, and my jaw dropped. It was a digital warehouse of my generosity. There was the winter coat I sent last year, new with tags. There were the noise-canceling headphones I sent for Leo, sealed in box. There was the set of expensive art supplies I sent for Sophie, unopened, dozens of items, all of them gifts I had carefully chosen, wrapped, and shipped with a handwritten note, all of them converted into cash listings within days of arrival. I scrolled down to the sold section. The PlayStation 4 Pro from last Christmas, sold on December 27th for $350. The iPad mini from 3 years ago, sold on January 2nd. Supermom Deals had a 5-star rating. The reviews were glowing. Great seller. Item exactly as described. Fast shipping. Sarah was running a business, and I was her supplier. I sat back in the stiff hotel chair, the glow of the screen illuminating my face in the dark room. This was it. This was the proof. She was not just selling old things to pay bills. She was intercepting the gifts before the children even touched them. She was stealing from her own kids. Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from Sarah. Riley, please. The kids are asking why you hate them. I do not know what to tell them anymore. Just send the money. I will take the post down. I promise. I stared at the message. The audacity was breathtaking. She was still trying to play me. She thought I was still the weak, guilty sister she could bully into compliance. I looked at the screen again. Super mom deals. A plan began to form in my mind. It was dark. It was cold. It was something the old Riley would never have considered. But the old Riley died the moment she saw Sophie shivering on that porch. I picked up my phone and typed a reply to Sarah. My fingers moved slowly, deliberately. You win. Sarah, I cannot handle the guilt. I will buy everything on the list. I waited. 3 seconds later, the reply came. Oh, thank God. You are doing the right thing. Riley, the kids are going to be so happy. Just send the money to my PayPal. It is faster. I smiled. It was a tight, humorless smile. No, I typed back. I want to see their faces. I already bought everything. I am driving down. I will be there on Christmas Eve with the gifts. There was a long pause. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. She wanted the cash. She needed the cash for the gambling debt. Gifts were harder to liquidate, but she could not say no. If she refused the gifts, she would expose herself. That is, 小于今后零. 2# is greater than great. She finally replied, but honestly, cash might be better. We have some bills. 小于今后零 are 今后大于. It is the gifts or nothing. Sarah, I texted, I want to be the cool aunt. Remember, I want to see them open the boxes. Another pause. Then, okay, fine. Bring the gifts. We will have a big party. I will invite some friends. Friends. I knew what that meant. She was already lining up buyers. She was going to invite people over. Maybe even her bookie or her creditors. To show them the merchandise was real. She was going to sell the items right there at the party. Or promise them immediately after. Perfect. I replied. See you on the 24th. I put the phone down. I turned back to my laptop. I opened a new browser tab. I searched for packaging supplies Chicago. I needed boxes. Lots of boxes. I needed empty boxes that looked like PlayStation 5s. I needed empty boxes that looked like iPads. I needed the glossy, high-quality packaging that screamed expensive. I found a supplier that sold replacement boxes for electronics, usually for people who wanted to increase the resale value of their used items. I ordered 9 of them, overnight shipping to the hotel. Then I went to a different website, a discount educational supply store. I ordered 9 sets of comprehensive math and reading workbooks. I ordered 9 packs of thermal socks. I ordered 9 toothbrushes. I ordered 9 bars of soap. I was going to give Sarah exactly what she asked for. I was going to give her a mountain of beautifully wrapped, high-end boxes, and inside each one, I was going to put the things her children actually needed, the things she had neglected to provide. When those kids opened the boxes, Sarah's world would crumble. Her creditors would see the fraud. Her friends would see the deception. And the children, 小于今后零, 2# is greater than well. The children would be disappointed. Yes, but for the first time in their lives, they would have a chance at the truth. I walked to the window and looked out at the falling snow. The point of no return had been crossed. There was no going back to being the nice sister. There was no going back to peace. I was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of my family's living room. And for the first time in days, I slept soundly. The fluorescent lights of the supercenter buzzed overhead, a low and irritating hum that seemed to drill directly into my temples. It was late afternoon on December 23rd, and the store was a chaotic sea of last-minute shoppers. Desperate parents were fighting over the last action figures, and carts were overflowing with wrapping paper and cheap chocolate. The air smelled of wet wool, floor wax, and stress. I pushed my cart down the aisle, moving with a ghost-like detachment, while everyone around me was frantically searching for joy. I was shopping for survival. My cart did not contain toys. It did not contain electronics. It was filled with the unglamorous, brutal necessities of life. I picked up a pack of thermal socks, the thick kind meant for construction workers. I tossed them in. Next came the underwear, packs of 10, strictly functional. Then, hygiene products, toothbrushes, fluoride toothpaste, bars of antibacterial soap, shampoo meant for lice prevention. Just in case, I reached the school supply aisle. It was ravaged, picked clean by the back-to-school rush months ago. But I found what I needed: thick, heavy anthologies of classic literature, math workbooks, dictionaries. I stood there holding a hardcover copy of a dictionary, feeling its weight in my hands. It was heavy, roughly the same weight I estimated as a gaming console. A woman squeezed past me, her cart piled high with colorful plastic toys. She looked at my cart, filled with soap, socks, and books, and gave me a pitying smile. "Doing a charity drive?" she asked kindly. I looked at her. My eyes felt dry and hot, something like that. I whispered, "I paid in cash." I did not want a paper trail on my credit card. Not for this. I wheeled the heavy cart out into the parking lot, where the snow was coming down in thick, wet clumps. It was sticking to the asphalt, turning the world into a slushy gray mess. Back in my hotel room, the transformation began. The replacement boxes I had ordered had arrived that morning. They were perfect, glossy, high-definition cardboard replicas of the real things. The box for the PlayStation 5 Pro was sleek and white, promising hours of escapism. The boxes for the iPads were minimalist and elegant. I cleared the desk and laid everything out like a surgeon preparing for an operation. First, the PlayStation box. I opened it carefully. I took the stack of math workbooks and the dictionary. I wrapped them in bubble wrap to stop them from sliding around. I placed them inside the console box. I lifted it. It felt substantial. It felt expensive. I sealed the box with a clear, circular wafer seal I had bought online, making it look factory fresh. Next, the iPads. I folded the thermal underwear and the thick socks tightly. I pressed them into the slim, white boxes. I added a bar of soap to each one to give it a little density and to stop the rattle. I worked for hours. My hands moved with a mechanical precision, but my mind was a wreck. Every piece of tape I cut felt like I was severing a tie with my sister. Every ribbon I curled felt like a tightening noose. I looked at the pile of gifts when I was finished. They looked magnificent. They were wrapped in shimmering gold and silver paper, topped with velvet bows. They looked like $2,000 worth of love, but they were Trojan horses. Inside, they carried the harsh truth that Sarah had been hiding from her children. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at them. A wave of nausea rolled over me. I imagined Leo's face. I imagined the light in his eyes when he saw the shape of the PlayStation box. I imagined the moment he tore the paper. I was about to break his heart. I am a monster. A voice in my head whispered, "You are the villain in their story." "No," another voice answered. It was the voice of the little girl I used to be. The one who watched my father work himself to death. "You are not the villain. You are the wake-up call. Sarah is the one who sold their childhoods. You are just showing them the receipt." I did not sleep that night. I lay in the dark, listening to the wind howl against the hotel window. The storm was intensifying. The Weather Channel said it was a blizzard, a historic system sweeping across the Midwest. It was fitting. Morning came, gray and bleak. It was December 24th, Christmas Eve. I loaded the car. The trunk was packed tight with the golden boxes. I checked out of the hotel, leaving the key card on the desk. The drive to Sarah's house was a nightmare. The roads were slick sheets of ice concealed under drifting snow. My windshield wipers slapped frantically against the glass, fighting a losing battle against the white onslaught. Visibility was near zero. I was driving into a white void. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The car slipped and fishtailed as I turned onto Sycamore Street. I saw the house. It was lit up like a beacon. Every light in the house was on. There were cars in the driveway, 3 of them, beat-up sedans and trucks covered in rust and snow. Sarah had guests. My stomach twisted. She had actually done it. She had invited an audience. I knew exactly who they were. They were not family friends here to sing carols. They were the buyers. Sarah had likely pre-sold the items. She had probably promised them that as soon as the rich aunt dropped off the goods, they could take them home for a discount price. She was going to sell the gifts right out from under the Christmas tree. I parked the car on the street, half mounting a snowbank. I killed the engine. For a moment, I just sat there. The heat of the engine ticked as it cooled. The cold began to seep in immediately. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked pale. My lipstick was a shade too dark, looking almost like dried blood against my skin. I looked severe. I looked like Judgment Day. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of leather and anxiety. "Showtime. Riley," I muttered. I popped the trunk. I made 3 trips to the porch, carrying the heavy, gleaming boxes. The snow bit at my face, stinging my cheeks. I stood on the porch, surrounded by the gold and silver pile. I could hear voices inside. Laughter. Loud, boisterous laughter. The sound of a television blaring. The clinking of bottles. It sounded like a party. It sounded happy, but I knew it was a lie. It was a thin veneer of celebration painted over a foundation of rot. I raised my hand and knocked on the peeling paint of the door. 3 hard, deliberate raps. The laughter inside died down. I heard footsteps, heavy, eager footsteps. The door swung open. Sarah stood there. She was wearing a red sequin dress that was too tight and too fancy for a living room gathering. Her hair was done up in intricate curls. She was wearing makeup, heavy contouring that tried to hide the lines of stress and exhaustion around her eyes. She looked at me, then her eyes dropped to the pile of gifts at my feet. Her face lit up with a greed so naked, so raw, that I almost took a step back. It was not the look of a mother seeing gifts for her children. It was the look of an addict seeing a fix. "Riley," she shrieked, throwing her arms open. "You made it." She hugged me. She smelled of cheap perfume and stale cigarette smoke. Her body felt thin and wiry against mine. "Merry Christmas, Sarah." I said. My voice was flat. Sarah pulled back, grinning. She turned to the room behind her. Look, everyone, I told you she would come. The rich aunt is here. I stepped inside. The heat hit me first. Dry and stifling. The house smelled of roasted meat, beer, and damp carpet. The living room was crowded. Dave was there, sitting in a recliner, holding a beer. He looked red-faced and sweaty. There were 4 other adults I did not recognize. 2 men in flannel shirts who looked like they worked at the local plant, and 2 women with hard faces and dyed hair. They were all looking at the gifts with intense, predatory interest. And then I saw the children. They were huddled in the corner, sitting on the floor near the tree. The tree was a sad, artificial thing, missing half its needles. But the children, Xiaoyu Jinghaoling, are Jinghao Dayu. They were looking at me with wide, fearful eyes. They were not excited. They looked anxious. They looked like they were waiting for the other shoe to drop. Leo was sitting in the back, his arms crossed over his chest. He looked at me with a mixture of hope and distrust that broke my heart all over again. Bring them in, Dave yelled, gesturing to the boxes with his beer bottle. Do not leave the loot in the cold. Sarah and one of the strange men rushed past me to grab the boxes from the porch. They carried them in like they were carrying gold bars. They piled them in the center of the room, a gleaming mountain of wealth in the middle of the squalor. The room went silent. Everyone was staring at the boxes. There it is, Sarah said, her voice trembling with excitement. She reached out and touched the PlayStation box, the big one, just like you asked for. Leo stood up slowly. He took a step forward. Sarah turned to me, her eyes flashing. Thank you, Riley, she said, but her eyes were signaling something else. She was signaling me to leave. You must be tired. It is a long drive back. She wanted me gone. She wanted me to leave so she could start the transaction. She wanted to hand the boxes over to the men on the couch and collect her cash. I smiled. It was the coldest smile I had ever worn. Oh, I am not tired, Sarah, I said, unbuttoning my coat. I drove all this way. I want to see them, open them. Sarah froze. The smile on her face faltered. Right now? She asked, her voice tight. We usually wait until morning. Tradition. You know, I stepped further into the room, blocking her path to the gifts. No tradition this year, I said. I looked directly at the strange men on the couch. I looked at Dave, and then I looked at the children. Open them, I commanded. Sarah's eyes widened in panic. She lunged forward, trying to grab the PlayStation box. No, she shrieked. We wait, but it was too late. I had already picked up the box and thrust it into Leo's hands. Open it. Leo, I said softly. The room was thick with tension. The air felt electrified. The strangers were leaning forward. Dave was standing up. Sarah was vibrating with panic. Leo looked at his mother. Then he looked at me. He ripped the paper. The sound of tearing paper was the only sound in the world. The sound of tearing paper echoed in the sudden silence of the living room. A sharp, crisp noise, like ice cracking under pressure. Leo's hands were shaking as he peeled back the gold foil. The white corner of the Sony PlayStation 5 box emerged, gleaming under the harsh overhead light. A collective gasp went through the room. Dave let out a low whistle. One of the men on the couch, a burly guy with a greasy cap, leaned forward. His eyes locked on the box. That is the Pro model, the man muttered to his friend. That is $800 on the street. Easy. Sarah was standing frozen, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. She looked terrified that I was still there, but her greed was overpowering her fear. She was mentally calculating the cash she was about to receive. "Open the rest," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. I grabbed the sleek white iPad boxes and started handing them out. One to Bella, one to Jacob, one to little Sophie. The kids moved like they were in a trance. They had never seen so much wealth in their living room before. Their small hands fumbled with the ribbons. "Wait," Sarah shouted, stepping forward. "Riley, stop. We should save this for Saoi Jing Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than for the camera. Let me get my phone." She was stalling. She was trying to figure out how to get the boxes away from the kids before they broke the seals. If the seals were broken, the resale value dropped. "It is fine, Sarah," I said, blocking her path with my body. "Let them enjoy the moment." The sound of ripping paper intensified. Within seconds, the floor was covered in gold and silver scraps. 9 children held 9 expensive-looking boxes. Leo looked up at me, his eyes shining. "Aunt Riley, so you ting Haling. 2 hash is greater than, is this real?" "Open it," I whispered. He turned the box over. He ran his thumbnail along the wafer seal I had applied so carefully in the hotel room. He popped the cardboard tab. The room held its breath. Leo lifted the lid. He stared into the box, his brow furrowed. He blinked, confused. He reached inside. Instead of pulling out a sleek black console, his hand grasped a thick, heavy paperback book. He pulled it out. Math for 8th graders. Advanced algebra. He reached in again. He pulled out a hardbound Oxford English dictionary. He reached in a 3rd time. He pulled out a bag of rice. The silence in the room shattered. "What the hell?" Dave roared from his recliner. He spilled his beer as he lurched forward. Bella opened her iPad box. She tipped it upside down. 3 pairs of thick gray wool socks and a bar of soap fell onto the carpet with a dull thud. Sophie opened her MacBook box. It was filled with thermal underwear and a pack of toothbrushes. The confusion on the children's faces was heartbreaking. They looked at the boxes, then at the contents, then at me. They did not understand, but the adults understood. The man in the greasy cap stood up, his face turning red. "Is this a joke?" He barked at Sarah. "You told me you had the goods." "Sarah, I brought the cash." Sarah was staring at the pile of socks and books, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, her face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of gray. "Riley," she screamed, turning on me. "What did you do? Where are the gifts?" I stood my ground, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. "These are the gifts, Sarah," I said loudly, ensuring everyone in the room could hear. "Socks, soap, books, food, the things your children actually need. You promised." Sarah shrieked, lunging at me. "You said you bought the list." "I did not promise anything," I countered, my voice rising. "I said I would bring gifts, and I did. I brought them warm clothes because I saw them shivering on the porch while you wore a $1,200 coat. I brought them soap because their hygiene is neglected, and I brought them books because you pulled them out of school to homeschool them, which apparently means letting them watch television all day while you scroll Facebook." Dave stumbled toward me, his fists clenched. "You think you are funny? You think you can come into my house and humiliate us?" I turned to face him, my eyes blazing. "Humiliate you?" I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You humiliated yourselves the moment you decided to sell your children's Christmas presents to pay off a gambling debt. The room erupted. Gambling debt? The man in the cap yelled. Is that what this is? You owe me $500. Dave, you said you would pay me tonight with the PlayStation money. Another woman stood up. Wait a minute. Sarah told me she needed the money for Leo's braces. She sold me the iPad you sent last year for $200. The truth was spilling out like blood from a wound. The guests, the creditors, turned on Sarah and Dave instantly. They realized they had been played too. They had been invited here under the pretense of a sale, and now there was nothing to sell but soap and socks. Sarah looked frantic. She looked from the angry creditors to the confused children to me. You ruined everything, she screamed at me, tears streaming down her face. Ruining her makeup. You ruined Christmas. How could you be so cruel to them? Look at them. They are crying. I looked at the children. Sophie was indeed crying, holding a bar of soap. Leo was just staring at the math book, his face a mask of shock. I am not the cruel one. Sarah, I said, my voice shaking with rage. I reached into my purse and pulled out a thick envelope. Cruelty is selling a gift your sister sent with love so you can play online poker. Cruelty is letting your son believe his aunt forgot about him because you intercepted the package. I ripped the envelope open. I pulled out the stack of printed screenshots I had prepared. I threw them into the air. They fluttered down like confetti. Screenshots of her Supermom Deals account, bank statements showing the transfers to the offshore casino, and the chat logs where she negotiated the sale of last year's gifts. Read them, I yelled. Look at the dates. She sold Bella's coat 3 days after Christmas. She sold Leo's Switch the day it arrived. Leo picked up one of the papers from the floor. He read it. His hands started to shake. Mom, he whispered. You, Sao Ting Ha Ling, 2# is greater than you sold my Switch. You said it got lost in the mail. Sarah did not answer him. She was scrambling on the floor, trying to gather the papers, trying to hide the evidence. Stop it. Stop looking at them. She screamed at the kids. She is lying. Your aunt is a liar. She photoshopped these, but it was too late. The illusion was broken. The kids were not stupid. They saw the dates. They saw the prices. They saw their mother's username. Dave grabbed my arm. His grip was painful. Browsing. Get out of my house, he growled, his breath smelling of rot and alcohol. Get out before I throw you out. I yanked my arm away with a strength I did not know I possessed. Do not touch me, I hissed, and do not worry. I am leaving, but I am not leaving alone. Sirens wailed in the distance. They were getting louder. Sarah froze. She looked at the window. Blue and red lights were flashing against the snow, illuminating the plastic-taped window in a rhythmic, terrifying pulse. You called the police? Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. On your own, sister? I called Child Protective Services. I corrected her, and I called the fraud department. And yes, I called the police because there are illegal gambling debts being settled in a house full of minors. The front door burst open. Police, everybody stay where you are. 3 officers stormed in, their hands on their holsters. Behind them, 2 women in professional coats, social workers, stepped in, their faces grim. The room dissolved into chaos. The creditors tried to flee out the back door, but were stopped by more officers. Dave tried to argue and was shoved against the wall. Sarah collapsed onto the floor, sobbing hysterically, clutching a PlayStation box filled with rice. I stood in the middle of the storm, motionless. I looked at Leo. He was still holding the math book. He looked at me, and for a second, I thought he would hate me. I thought he would scream at me for destroying his family, but he did not. He looked at his mother, sobbing on the floor over a box of rice, ignoring her children entirely. Then he looked at me, and he nodded, a tiny, imperceptible nod. He knew. He finally understood. The social workers moved in, gently guiding the children toward the kitchen, away from the scene. "I am sorry," I whispered to the empty air as they were led away. "I am so sorry it had to be this way." But as I watched Sarah being handcuffed, still screaming about how I was jealous of her happiness, I knew I was not sorry for her. I was only sorry I had not done it sooner. The silence that followed the chaos was heavy and suffocating. The police cruisers had departed, their red and blue lights fading into the snowy distance like dying embers. The social workers had driven away in their sensible sedans, taking 9 confused and traumatized children to an emergency foster facility 3 towns over. The neighbors, who had peered through their curtains with voracious curiosity, had finally turned off their porch lights. I sat in my rental car, parked a block away from the now dark house. The engine was running, pumping heat into the cabin, but I could not stop shivering. My hands, resting on the leather steering wheel, were trembling with a fine, rhythmic vibration that had nothing to do with the cold. It was the adrenaline crash. It was the physical toll of tearing my own family apart with surgical precision. I looked at the house one last time. It looked like a corpse. The front door was slightly ajar, the lock broken by the police entry. The plastic on the window flapped mournfully in the wind. Inside that house, the Christmas tree still stood, surrounded by scraps of gold wrapping paper and boxes of rice and soap. I put the car in gear and drove back to the hotel. The town of Oak Haven felt different now. Before, it was just a depressed, gray place. Now, it felt like a crime scene I was fleeing. Back in my room, I stripped off my coat and poured myself a glass of tap water. I sat down at the desk and opened my laptop. I knew I should sleep. I knew I should call a lawyer, but a morbid curiosity gripped me. I needed to see the blast radius of the bomb I had detonated. I logged onto Facebook. The notification bell was silent. No new tags from Sarah. No new guilt trips. I navigated to the Moms Support Moms group. The atmosphere in the digital square had shifted violently. It was no longer a support group. It was a lynch mob. Someone, a neighbor, perhaps, or one of the creditors who had escaped arrest, had posted a blurry photograph taken from a cell phone. It showed Sarah being led out of the house in handcuffs, her red sequin dress looking gaudy and tragic against the backdrop of the snow and the police cruiser. The caption read, "Remember the mom who begged for iPads yesterday? She just got arrested for fraud and child neglect." Turns out the evil sister was actually the hero. I scrolled down to the comments. There were thousands of them. I knew something was off about her story. One user wrote, "Nobody needs 9 iPads for homeschooling. I donated $50 to her GoFundMe last year." Another wrote, "I feel sick. I literally took that money out of my grocery budget because I felt bad for her kids. To think she smoked it or gambled it away makes me want to scream." "Does anyone have the sister's contact information?" a third person asked. "We should apologize to her." I closed the tab. I did not want their apologies. Their praise felt just as toxic as their condemnation. They did not care about the truth. They just wanted a villain to burn. Yesterday, it was me. Today, it was Sarah. Tomorrow, it would be someone else. Then, the news sites started picking it up. Oak Haven mother, arrested in Christmas Eve raid. Gambling ring bust reveals shocking child neglect case. The supermom scam. How one woman fooled the internet. Sarah's mugshot appeared on the screen. She looked haggard. Her mascara was smeared down her cheeks in black streaks. Her eyes were wide and manic. She did not look like the victim she always pretended to be. She looked like exactly what she was, a desperate, addicted woman who had run out of lies. My phone rang. The screen lit up with the word, Mom. I stared at it. I knew this call was coming. I had been dreading it more than the confrontation with Dave. Judy Vance, my mother, was the architect of this dysfunction. She was the one who taught Sarah that tears were a currency and that responsibility was something to be outsourced. I answered the call. Hello? Mom, I said. My voice was hollow. You enter the gates of hell. Riley, Judy shrieked. The sound was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. You evil, spiteful little girl. What have you done? I did what I had to do, I said calmly. I saved those kids. Mom, they were living in filth. They were starving. Sarah was selling their clothes to pay for offshore gambling. You called the police, Judy screamed. You sent your own sister to jail on Christmas Eve. Do you have any idea what people are saying? Do you know what Linda just texted me? She said our family is white trash. You did this. You aired our dirty laundry for the whole world to see. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, even now, with Sarah in a cell and the children in foster care. My mother's primary concern was not the safety of her grandchildren. It was her reputation. It was what Aunt Linda thought. Did you know? I asked, cutting through her tirade. Did I know what? Judy snapped. Did you know she was selling the gifts? Did you know she was gambling? Or did you just choose not to look because it was easier to blame me for not giving enough money? There was a silence on the other end. A heavy, guilty silence. She is sick. Riley, Judy whispered, her voice dropping to a harsh hiss. She has a problem. You do not send sick people to prison. You help them. You cover for them. That is what family does. No, Mom, I said, tears finally spilling over my cheeks. That is what accomplices do. I am done covering. I am done paying. And if you want to be angry at someone, look in the mirror. You created this. You taught her that the world owed her a living. I am disowning you, Judy said. The words were flat and final. Do not come back here. Do not call me. As far as I am concerned, I only have one daughter, and she is suffering in a jail cell because of you. She hung up. I sat there in the dim light of the hotel room, the phone still pressed to my ear. I listened to the dial tone. I should have felt devastated. I should have felt like an orphan. But strangely, beneath the pain, there was a sense of lightness. The anchor had been cut, the weight that had been dragging me down for 30 years. The obligation, the guilt, the demands was gone. I stood up and walked to the window. The blizzard had passed. The sky was clearing, revealing a cold, dark moon. My phone buzzed again. I braced myself for another attack, but it was an email from the County Child Protective Services, Miss Vance, regarding the emergency placement of the minors removed from 412 Sycamore Street. We need to speak with you regarding temporary kinship guardianship. Please contact us immediately. I looked at the message. Kinship guardianship. They wanted me to take them. 9 children. 9 traumatized, angry, confused children who had just watched me arrest their parents. I looked around the hotel room. I thought about my penthouse in Chicago. I thought about my white carpets, my expensive wine, My quiet, orderly life. Taking them would destroy that life. It would be messy. It would be loud. It would be expensive in a way that had nothing to do with money. But then I thought about the boxes. I thought about the math book in Leo's hand. I thought about the look he gave me. That tiny, imperceptible nod. He knew I was the only one who had ever told him the truth. I sat back down at the desk. I opened a new document on my laptop. I began to type, not a resignation letter to my company, but a leave of absence request. The public fallout was just beginning. The internet would argue about Sarah for a week and then move on to the next tragedy. My mother would spend the rest of her life playing the victim, but those kids, they had to live with this forever, unless someone stepped in to rewrite the ending. I was the villain in Sarah's story. I was the villain in my mother's story. But maybe, just maybe, I could be the hero in theirs. I typed my name at the bottom of the letter. I hit send. Then I picked up the phone and dialed the number for Child Protective Services. "This is Riley Vance," I said when the officer answered. "I am the aunt. Tell me what I need to do." The weeks that followed were a blur of fluorescent lights, hard plastic chairs, and the smell of stale coffee in government offices. I moved out of the hotel and rented a large, furnished house on the outskirts of Oak Haven. It was not a home. It was a holding pattern, a neutral ground where the wreckage of my family could be assessed. The legal battles were brutal. Sarah, even from behind bars, fought viciously. She used her court-appointed lawyer to paint me as a child stealer, a spinster with a savior complex who had manipulated the situation to steal her angels. But the evidence was overwhelming. The forensic accounting, the chat logs from the resale sites, and the testimony of the creditors buried her. Dave took a plea deal. He testified against Sarah regarding the welfare fraud in exchange for a lighter sentence. His loyalty, it turned out, was as cheap as the beer he drank. But the real war was not in the courtroom. It was in the living room of the rental house. The first month with the children was a nightmare. They were not grateful. They were furious. They were grieving. They had been programmed for years to see me as the enemy, the rich aunt who looked down on them. Now, I was their warden. Sophie would scream at me that I was not her mother. Bella refused to eat anything I cook, demanding the fast food Sarah used to buy. The younger ones cried for their parents at night, sounds that tore through the thin walls and kept me awake until dawn. I did not try to buy their love. I did not buy them toys. I did not buy them electronics. I established routine. Breakfast was at 7. School. Real school. Not the fake homeschooling Sarah claimed to do. Started at 8. Dinner was at 6. And everyone sat at the table. It was a war of attrition. Every day was a battle over brushed teeth, finished homework, and clean clothes. I was exhausted. My skin broke out. I lost 10 pounds. I looked less like a marketing executive and more like a ghost. One evening, in late February, the breaking point came. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes. The house was quiet for once. Leo walked in. He was holding the math workbook I had put in the PlayStation box. He stood there for a long time, watching me scrub a pot. "Why did you do it?" he asked. His voice was cracking, deepening into manhood, but still carrying the tremor of a child. I turned off the water and dried my hands. I leaned against the counter, looking at him. He looked so much like Sarah did before the bitterness took her. "Do what?" "Leo?" I asked. "Send Mom to jail," he said. He did not say it with anger. He said it with a heavy, weary curiosity. "She says you did it because you are jealous." She says you want to steal us because you cannot have kids of your own. I took a deep breath. I could have lied. I could have softened the blow. But I had promised myself, no more lies. I did it because she was stealing your future. Leo, I said. I pointed to the book in his hand. She sold your gifts. She kept you out of school so she could collect benefits for homeschooling without doing the work. She was using you, and if I let it continue, you would have turned 18 with no education, no money, and no skills. You would have become just like them. Leo looked down at the book. He ran his thumb over the cover. She sold the Switch. He whispered. I knew she did. I saw the box in the trash can the next day, but she told me I lost it. She told me I was irresponsible, and that is why you would not send another one. He looked up at me, and his eyes were wet. I thought I was crazy. He said, I thought I was a bad kid. I walked over to him. I wanted to hug him, but I held back. I did not want to force intimacy he was not ready for. You are not a bad kid, Leo, I said firmly. You are a smart kid who was lied to by the people who were supposed to protect you, and I am sorry I did not stop it sooner. I thought sending money was enough. I was wrong. He nodded slowly. He did not hug me. He did not say, thank you. He just turned and walked out of the kitchen. But the next morning, when I came downstairs, Leo was at the kitchen table. He had the math book open. He was helping Sophie with her reading. He looked up as I entered. We are out of milk. Aunt Riley, he said. It was a mundane sentence, but it was the first time he had called me Aunt Riley without a sneer. It was a truce. The scars were deep. Bella still hoarded food under her mattress, afraid it would disappear. Liam still flinched if I raised my voice too quickly. They were damaged. We all were. I had lost my mother. I had lost my sister. My career in Chicago was on indefinite hold. My friends back in the city had stopped calling. Uncomfortable with the messiness of my new life, I sat on the porch of the rental house one evening, watching the snow melt, revealing the brown, dead grass of March. I felt empty. I felt hollowed out by the trauma. But then, the front door opened. Sophie stepped out. She was wearing a clean sweater, one I had washed, not bought. Her hair was brushed. She sat down next to me on the swing. She did not say anything. She just leaned her head against my shoulder. It was a small weight, but it felt heavier than the world. I put my arm around her. We sat there in silence, watching the sun set over the bleak Ohio landscape. It was not a happy ending. It was not a movie moment. It was just a moment of peace. And for the first time in my life, I realized that peace could not be bought. It had to be built, brick by painful brick, from the rubble of the truth. 6 months later, the courtroom smelled of floor wax and old paper. I sat in the front row, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. To my left sat the lawyer I had hired, a sharp woman named Eleanor, who had spent the last half year fighting tooth and nail against my mother's petitions and Sarah's appeals. Today was the final hearing for permanent guardianship. Sarah was not there. She was currently serving her sentence at the state correctional facility, having pleaded guilty to 3 counts of fraud and child endangerment. My mother, Judy, was there. However, she sat on the opposite side of the aisle, refusing to look at me. She wore black, as if she were attending a funeral. In a way, she was. She was mourning the death of the illusion she had spent a lifetime protecting. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair and glasses perched on the end of her nose, shuffled the papers on her bench. She looked at the reports from the social workers. She looked at the grade cards Leo and Bella had submitted. Proof that in 6 months of real schooling, they had jumped 2 grade levels in reading and math. The court finds that it is in the best interest of the children to remain in the custody of Ms. Riley Vance, the judge announced. Her voice was devoid of drama, just a simple statement of fact. Permanent guardianship is granted. The gavel banged, a sharp, final sound. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since Christmas Eve. Outside the courthouse, the summer sun was blinding. It was June now. The snow was a distant memory. My mother stopped me on the steps. "You won," she said. Her voice was brittle. "Are you happy now? You have the kids. You have the control. You always wanted to be the boss. Riley, now you are the boss of a broken family." I looked at her. I saw the lines of bitterness etched into her face. The way her mouth turned down at the corners. I saw my future in her face if I had stayed in Chicago, throwing money at problems instead of facing them. I did not win. "Mom," I said softly, "nobody won. We all lost, but at least the bleeding has stopped." She scoffed and turned away, walking down the steps to her car alone. I watched her go. I felt a pang of sadness, but no guilt. The guilt was gone. I walked to the parking lot where my minivan was waiting. Yes, a minivan. The sleek black sedan was gone, traded in for something that could hold 9 children and 10 bags of groceries. The sliding door opened before I even reached it. "Did we win?" Leo asked. He was sitting in the front passenger seat. He was taller now, filling out. The sullen look was gone, replaced by a cautious optimism. "We did," I said, climbing into the driver's seat. A cheer went up from the back rows. It was chaotic, loud, and messy. "Can we go to get ice cream?" Sophie yelled. "Pizza," Liam shouted. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh, one that came from my belly, not my throat. "We are going home," I said, "and we are going to cook dinner together." As I drove away from the courthouse, I thought about the life I had left behind. The penthouse, the boardroom, the silence. I missed it sometimes. I missed the sleep. I missed the money. But then I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw Bella reading a book. I saw Jacob showing Liam something on a tablet, a cheap, educational tablet I had bought them, with strict parental controls. I saw Leo looking out the window, not with the empty stare of a prisoner, but with the curiosity of a boy who finally had a future. I realized then that I was not a savior. I was not a saint. I was still Riley Vance, the woman who liked expensive wine and quiet mornings. I still got angry. I still made mistakes. I had shouted at them yesterday for leaving wet towels on the floor. I was not perfect, but for the first time in the history of the Vance family, I was present. The cycle of enabling was broken. The chain of lies was snapped. Sarah was in prison, learning the hard way that actions have consequences. My mother was alone, learning that denial is a lonely companion. And me, I was learning how to be a parent to 9 children who were not mine, but who belonged to me now in every way that mattered. I turned onto the road that led to our new house. It was not a mansion. It was a rambling farmhouse with peeling paint and a big yard. It needed work. It needed time. Just like us. I thought about the Christmas gifts, the boxes of emptiness that had started it all. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone is not what they want. It is what they need. Even if what they need is a box full of hard truths and a dictionary. I smiled, turned up the radio, and drove my noisy, chaotic, broken, beautiful family home.